Welcome to the Lofthouse Group Podcast, where we interview interesting people from the architecture and interior design industry. I'm your host, Ryan Gorman, Director of Lofthouse Group, and in this episode we're interviewing Mohammed Khan, who is the London Principal for Stephen George & Partners. Hope you enjoy. On today's show, I'm joined by Mohammed Khan, who's established the London studio of Stephen George & Partners. We're going to be talking about Mohammed's journey in architecture, about Stephen George & Partners London, and talking about what it's like to grow a studio. So, Mohammed, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Ryan. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no worries. Great to have you on. So I want to start right at the beginning. Let's talk about your journey first that's led you to kind of where we are now. You talk me through qualifying as an architect and then your experience up to the point where you decided, I'm ready to take on the growth of a studio.
Yeah, I mean, quite a funny story with me. I mean, my kind of family initially didn't support me to be an architect. I think parents kind of came from a very much military kind of background. My mum's side came from a textile background in terms of manufacturing. So parents either wanted me to kind of join the kind of family business or do what my kind of dad's side of the family were doing, being part of the kind of military and the kind of armed forces. So I decided to be an architect at the age of 10. I remember, entering a competition in Glasgow at the Kelvin Grove Art Galleries. Did this kind of, I felt fantastic painting, watercolor painting. Didn't think I would win, and I was the only one from the school that won the competition from our side, and got a nice rewarding medal. I was only 10 years old, and from there, the kind of guidance counselor spoke to my parents and said, let's see how we can kind of use his skills and qualities and put him in the right career. So as early as 10, I never knew what an architect did. For me, it was someone that just sits there, draws buildings on a drawing board. But obviously, after almost close to 20 years experience now, it is very much different. So originally born and bred in Scotland, Glasgow, East Glasgow. Studied at the University of Strathclyde. Really, really great university. I learned a lot from my colleagues and staff. And I was practicing there for a few years. I was getting involved in a lot of kind of commercial retail with the retail boom around 2002, between 2002 and 2005, 6. Unfortunately, recession hit us around 2008. And, by chance, I thought, let's see if there's any job opportunities in London. Applied for a job in London, didn't think anything would come out of it. Managed to get a couple of interviews. And yeah, I accepted my first job in London, which was for a private kind of residential stroke commercial developer. And again, his office was kind of based in a kind of a suburban setting and it was based in a loft conversion. So I thought, first of all, coming all the way from Glasgow, which I thought was a big city, then working in someone's kind of loft wasn't the London-esque kind of feeling that I had. But anyway, it was work, put food on the table. I enjoyed that for 6 months, just kind of contract work, and then kind of moved on. For me, London was never a permanent role. I remember on the day when I was leaving for London, giving the parents a hug and saying, I'll be back in 6 months. Don't worry, I'll be back in 6 months. Glasgow's my home. And I've been here for 11 years now. Settled down, got a really, really good job at the moment. Very kind of rewarding, really kind of extends of kind of circle of contacts as well. But it's just the way things are with London. I think once you kind of move here, it kind of consumes you because there is no sky, ceilings. So sky's the limit in London. So I ended up, getting into healthcare that was my kind of second job. Again, felt that to be very rewarding as well. Was dealing with a lot of clientels that were high dementia, challenging behaviour. So I felt that was a very kind of rewarding sector to be in. And there's a lot of things in terms of dealing with mental health and dementia, which is increasing in a lot of professionals as well. So I found a lot that I learned from that sector. And then I did that for a few years, and just kind of by chance, I moved into the kind of industrial logistics sector. Probably isn't the best sector to look at in terms of aesthetic architecture, but what I found, doing that now for about 8 years with data centers, it's certainly a sector that I find is recession-proof. And during the kind of difficult time of getting through that recession, around 2012 or so, post-recession, it was the only sector that I could see that was employing staff. It was very busy. We always had work, and we never were kind of worried about, is this project going to end and will I have another one? There was always, things kind of rolling over very quickly. And then, my kind of current experience in data centers now, I'm kind of moved on to my kind of current practice, SGP, Stephen George and Partners, who are a practice that have been around for about 51 years. So yeah, quite strange times at the moment. I mean, I left and joined a new job during the kind of pandemic. So I wasn't, used to team interview as well. Obviously, if we didn't have the current COVID restrictions, I'm sure both of us would be probably sitting in a studio or in front of each other, having this discussion. So for me, it was, a bit nerve-wracking as well, having that interview. I mean, it was something that I wasn't kind of prepared for. But yeah, I mean, I got through it quite well. It was a very rigorous process. Our kind of partners tailored the interview. I mean, I'm used to interviewing people, through teams. So I was on the other side of the fence. But yeah, using my kind of experience from working in management and interviewing people, the SGP interview went really well, and I've been working since September at this practice last year, and it's going really well. I'm enjoying every single day.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So I know you were brought in to head up and grow the London studio at Stephen George. So prior to taking on that role, talk to me about some of the experience that you'd had that has, I suppose, prepared you to be able to take on such an important role.
Yeah, I think certainly as architects, I mean, we're good at designing and solving problems. We're problem solvers. One of the things that I find that architects lack experience in is business management, business development, business management, sales and marketing. We're not sales people. But the thing is that one of the things that I did learn during my academic years was that you could have a really, really good design, but not be able to sell that design to your crit, to the professors, and you would get, a low mark. You could have an okay design, but be really good at selling your product and get a merit or a high mark. So I felt, for me personally, there was a gap in my experience, certainly wanting to kind of push into management. I started to do a lot of reading in business development, practice management. These are all core kind of topics of the ARB criteria. As an architect, we should be looking at professionalism, we should be looking at clientele, we should be also looking at practice management and how an office is run. Unfortunately, with architects being, very busy, projects, deadlines all the time, they don't have time to do the marketing side of things and the business development. So, by choice, I wanted to get involved in that. So, I had a chat with my, ex-line manager and said, I've got an interest here. I want to get involved in the kind of sales and the marketing side. So the rewarding thing was that, I was, thrown in the deep end and running all these jobs, given a small team. And the only person that I kind of answered to was a director, who's one of the, the kind of company equity partners. So that was good as well, because there were fewer management tiers between myself and the kind of boss, which meant that I was getting first-hand experience, and it also goes back to good communication as well. Like, I was always communicating and then saying, how do we tackle this client? How do we tackle this kind of project if we want to market it? And just using different methods of PR, for example. You've got different platforms of social media. Like I said, I see in my opinion that a lot of architects lack that skill and quality, and I do encourage other architects to get involved in that as well. So for me, yeah, I kind of made that choice and said I want to get involved, and for me it's been a blessing. It's worked, sort of thing. Yeah.
It's interesting that you took an interest in that, because most people I speak to that in architecture, that's the side of it that they the business development, winning new work, is the side that they either don't enjoy or they have very little experience in. Do you think that experience was absolutely crucial for you to take on this studio growth role?
Yeah, I think now I'm one of those kind of all-rounder architects. I wouldn't say I know everything about planning or tender or construction, but I'm kind of like a general all-rounder. If I don't know the information or the answer, I know where to find it.
Yeah.
We're all kind of students of knowledge at the moment. We're learning from day one, and we will still be learning till the day we retire. For me, it was definitely crucial, and making that decision was probably one of the best things I've done, because it forced the top tier to put me in that situation. There's very few lucky folk out there that fall in that position by chance, and some things in life, for me, it has been like that, where I've got into retail, I've got into healthcare, I've got into logistics, industrial, data centers by chance. I've never had to hunt for a job for more than a couple of weeks. I've always had, a career since 2002, so I've been very lucky. So for me, taking all that experience, I said, well, like, for me, a senior architect isn't where I want to be, an associate isn't where I want to be, a studio director. I'm already thinking, where do I kind of go above that? What do I need to do? So for me personally, it's all about climbing that career ladder, and I feel, just like London, there's no ceiling, there's no limit. I kind of compete against myself. I believe there's no limitation for me, so I'm already thinking about that next step, even though I've just kind of came into this job, and I think when you have that personal reflection and sit down and think, where are my gaps? And you need to be talking to people as well. Like, I've got role models and mentors in my practice that I've got 25, 30 years experience, and I think it's very important to have that as well. So you can talk to people and say, well, how am I doing? What do I need to do to be a better architect? More importantly, a better person. And it's worked for me. It's worked. Yeah.
No, that's awesome. And I suppose that's one of the benefits of growing a studio within a pre-existing, because that's what the next thing I was going to come on to is, so I guess you had the option, you could have either set up a studio on your own, and because if business development is something that you're strong at, it seems to be the area that most architects struggle with. So if you're good at business development, you can go and start your own practice, or like you've done, start a new offering for an existing studio. Talk to me about your thought process around taking this role to grow out Stephen George and Partners London office, and what it is about the company that kind of really made this opportunity appealing to you.
Great. I mean, Stephen George and Partners, mentioned before, they've been established for 51 years now. We had our kind of 50th anniversary last year. A very high presence in the Midlands. So our head office is in Leicester. We've got another office in Leeds, got an office in Birmingham, and one outside Birmingham in Solihull as well. We've always had a London postcode for the last 6 to 7 years, but I think now what they've done is that they've brought in some staff now to have their kind of foot on the ground in London as well, and create a stronger kind of presence in terms of design and delivery. I think initially, to be honest with you, the interview wasn't for a kind of a studio director. It was more of an associate director. But just seeing kind of my experience, and apologies, don't want to big myself up, but just seeing my experience, they were like, no, the role's changed. We feel you could get more of a studio director position, and we would want you to kind of head our London office, and I've got a colleague as well that's kind of looking at and helping out on a couple of the other sectors. For me, having that 51-year history was very important. What's happened to me in the past is that I work with practices that are not architects at the top as well. I think that's very important as well. And again, that's probably me just being biased because I'm a UK qualified architect. I feel if I'm an architect, the best models for me are experienced architects. That's something that I couldn't do in my past employees. I could have easily went and worked for an AJ top 5 company, but I would be a tadpole in a big pond. Here at SGP, I can call something my own. I've got a large influence in our office selection, which we've now moved closer to the central London now. So we've just recently done that. I've got a large influence on the recruitment, on the sectors we're working on, business development, marketing, any conferences we have to do. So, and the thing is that one of the things I find about SGP is the culture they bring as well. They've got very kind of multicultural, very open door policy as well. In the past, what used to happen was that I found sometimes, the top tier were very unapproachable. You would have to go through your line manager to talk to one of the senior partners to ask about something, about a policy, an office policy or whatever it was, or go through HR. Yeah, we still have these tiers at SGP, but I know that a junior part 2 can do a Teams call with one of the partners, and the partners will accommodate that call. And that's something that I've learned from the SGP partners, and I'm implementing that as well, that my door is always open, whether you're an architect, a partner, or an architectural assistant. I try my best to have time for everyone because I feel giving them that time is very valuable, and I feel from SGP, I've been given a lot of responsibility, but I'm getting a lot of support from them as well.
Well, I know you'd mentioned that previous when we've spoken before that mentoring is something that's really important to you. Is that something that you make part of your everyday job as a studio director?
Yeah, so I'm at the moment, just as well as running jobs at SGP, we have our kind of management matrix groups as well. So I'm part of the kind of mentoring training group with various other kind of colleagues as well. Again, mentoring, a bit of a kind of strange story. I never wanted to get into mentoring. It just happened by chance. One of my kind of past employees, I had a part 2 student. I was looking to do a part 3, and the line manager said to me that, Mohammed, can you help him with his PDRs and his case study? So I did that, and he got through his part 3. It felt very rewarding because he came up to me and thanked me for it. I didn't get a bonus, I didn't get a pay rise, I didn't get anything from it, but just the fact that he acknowledged my help meant a lot to me. And then my last employment, I was looking after around 8 students. the practice wasn't an RABA chartered or REBA chartered practice. So there was a kind of a limitation of a lot of architects that were there. So because I was probably the most qualified and experienced ARB registered architect there, they kind of brought in all the students under my umbrella. I mean, when I spoke to my partners at the interview and told them that I was mentoring almost 78 students, they were absolutely shocked and said, how can you do that? And I didn't find it difficult at all. I mean, honestly, you can just sit down with them and chat with them and build that relationship and trust. And it's not like coaching where you've got a 3 or 6 month program and you have a kind of a spreadsheet and strategic plan where we're going to do this on Monday, we're going to review this on Friday, and then let's look at it every second week or third week, whatever it is. I think for me, mentoring, it's a long term, and it's all about creating that connection with your mentee. And I've been working with UK students. I've also been helping with non-EU students as well that go through a very difficult process where they have to spend thousands and thousands of pounds going through the Part 3 process, then having to go back and validating their Part 1 and Part 2 as well. I mean, it's a lot of money. I've had a few meetings with the ARB and Ariba round the table discussions on changing that as well. Unfortunately, with the Brett exit and the way things are going, it's not changing, but I don't think it will happen overnight. We're slowly getting there. And also, just I've been also helping non-EU refugee professionals as well from the Middle East and North Africa as well, that have unfortunately left their country because of whatever political reasons they are, and are struggling to find jobs in the UK. So I am kind of mentoring that kind of group as well. I think for me, like I said before, it's very rewarding. And one of the things that I try and do is implement reverse mentoring as well, which is having that reflection. So what can I learn from my mentees? What can I learn from a Part 1 or a Part 2? Because what I find is that the more experience you have, the more further up you climb your career ladder, your blinkers get larger and larger. And no shame in saying this, that architects are can be very arrogant when it comes to their designs. And I think working with students has certainly helped me kind of humble myself, start to think outside the box as well and learn from them as well.
That's so interesting, because it takes, like you said, you have to remove arrogance and ego to be able to self-reflect and see where you can improve. And also teaching other people is often the best way to learn something yourself, isn't it? Right? It's like having to teach something. You have to understand it at a lot more in-depth level than if you were just going to learn it yourself. So I wanted to move on to, I guess, coming back to you started the studio, you joined the practice. That first couple of weeks of you being studio director in London, talk to me about like how that felt, how it went, the great bits, the bits that you've struggled with. I'm really keen to hear how that went.
Yeah, I think for me was that the only change was I was still working from home, when I left my last job in September. When I handed my kind of notice in and during my notice period, I was still working till Friday at 6 o'clock. Honestly, I had a responsibility, and I remember we had a planning application to be submitted for Friday. So I was working right till 6 o'clock. And then I took a week off, and then I started my new job on the following Monday. The only thing that changed was the email address and the laptop. That was it. Everything, the workstation in my kind of my current office, if you want to call it, /second bedroom. Nothing's changed. I think the challenges were obviously talking and meeting, new folk, you always want to create a good impression. And then I think certainly the sector that I'm kind of pushing from the southeast with data centers, it's the kind of buzzword at the moment. Everyone's talking about data centers. So I think I was very much kind of hyped when I came into SGP. It was like, Mohammed, this new studio director, big city, London, data centers. So it's meeting those expectations as well. Because, and then I didn't really tell people about my sector experience and my mentoring. So I started getting these phone calls. Mohammed, I hear you're a part 3 tutor. I hear you do a lot of work with universities. I hear you do a lot of mentoring. Can you talk to this person? Can you talk to that person? Can you be part of this management group? Or, you do a lot of sustainability awareness. Can you be part of our sustainability group? Or BIM, for example, you've got an interest in BIM. Can you be part of the BIM group? So I was just getting bombarded with all this kind of information. And then I think, again, one of the challenges was managing your time. I think to be a good architect, you have to manage your time. It's not all about painting pretty pictures and doing nice sketches. Again, my opinion, one of the best architects are the ones that can meet deadlines and can prioritize and can manage time. So yeah, that was one of the challenges for me, managing my time, managing expectations. There was very much a very kind of architectural ARB, REBA code of conduct kind of ethos happening at SGP. One of our our ethos goes back to kind of fairness, integrity. We challenge, we care, we deliver on our projects. But one of the things I'm trying to do is that I'm trying to challenge, I care, and I deliver outside as well, not just the projects. So dealing with different personalities was always challenging. And my first day, I went up to head office to Leicester. So the first 2 days I was there, and I was just split and torn in half. It was like from 9 o'clock, meeting with this partner, meeting with this director or this colleague, and it was just 2 days of intense training. And I think everyone just kind of wanted to have the opportunity to talk to the new director and to kind of share some ideas as well. So I think for me, that was one of the kind of challenges.
And this focus on data centers. So I wanted to have a chat specifically about this, because I think data sectors as a project type gets a bit of a bad rap in the architecture community. So I think I've spoken to you about this before, that I've spent time recruiting within cloud computing, and how the need for data centers is just massive, and it's more than people realize. So I was really keen for you to, since that's the area that you focused on, and you mentioned earlier that it's recession-proof, just to, I guess, give us a bit of an insight into data centers as projects. What's interesting about them from an architectural perspective, because I think that they are the least understood project type by architects, yet most criticized.
Yeah, I think it's really unfortunate that a lot of people out there don't understand what a data center is and understand the sector. But as we've talked before, I would say it's probably the number one recession-proof sector out there. I would encourage a lot of architects and juniors to read up on data centers. I mean, you could go to across Slough Trading Estates as an example. It's the largest campus in Europe with between 35 to 40 data centers. It's a carpet of grey sheds. I mean, that is the kind of traditional architectural setup of it being a kind of a grey shed. But it's not something that's new. I mean, data centers have been about since the 80s. Since it started growing quite rapidly around the 90s, and it's basically a building that kind of stores, manages, and processes your data. Now, maybe a lot of people aren't aware of this, but our mobile phones, our apps on the phones, our activity tracker, gaming that we do in the evenings, all of our e-commerce, internet banking, social media platform, LinkedIn, Facebook, the streaming that we do as well. A lot of people are now streaming and not watching, your kind of normal Sky or terrestrial channels now. All of that has to be managed and processed and stored somewhere. So that does go back to a data center. What I'm finding is that instead of it being a gradual uplift, it's been a very kind of steep incline, and it is because that people are now using the internet a lot more. We've got 5G that's came in now. I've just recently bought an iPhone 12, and I know it's got 5G on it, and I've been told it's 100 times faster than 4G. So that's just showing that is what the demand is. And you're having these large tech companies like the likes of Facebook, Google, Microsoft, AWS, Amazon, that are just growing so rapidly. I think what my challenge now is that to make data centers more architecturally pleasing, and also to educate the planners, the consultants, the clients on how to make them more attractive and to make them, basically architecturally pleasing. But then at the same time, they still serve that function. What I find them interesting is, I'm a kind of a tech geek myself. So I do find the fascination of all the servers and the liquid and the air cooling, all the battery rooms, generators, etc. And having all these different components and being a very kind of strong believer of sustainability, it's given me the opportunity now to look at different ways of how we can make them more sustainable. In a nutshell, you can say that there's 3 or 4 different types of data centers. So you've got your kind of large hyperscalers. So you have like your Facebook, Google, AWS, that can take large campuses, and that'll be just one kind of large building, and that could be anything between 750 to 1 million kind of square feet, kind of massive kind of shed. And then you have these kind of existing logistic sheds where you would find they could be delivery storage areas for UPS or DHL, for example, or Travis Perkins. But they get built speculatively, and they get refurbed and retrofitted as a data center, and we call them co-location. So they're a bit like the kind of hotel type, where the data center provider will kind of manage the building and manage the kind of power, manage the cooling, and but then the kind of tech companies will come in and put their servers in, and they'll manage their own server space, but then they'll pay for that rentable space. And then the last part, which again is something that I see is growing really fast as well, is the kind of edge data centers, which they're almost like these small kind of ship-sized containers, and they house servers, and they also house the kind of cooling and backup gens and batteries in that container, and these tend to get plotted around cities. They could be in the top of a car park or the back of a building or on the kind of edge of a city, to give you that kind of boost of kind of data processing power, sort of thing. Yeah.
And so, as I understand it, you do mostly UK-based data center work, but there must be a huge international demand as well, right, for data center architecture?
Yeah, I mean, at the moment, I have worked on a few cities abroad in Europe as well. So usually the kind of core cities we talk about are, the acronym is FLAP. So you've got Frankfurt, London, Amsterdam, and Paris. And a lot of people now add FLAP D. They add Dublin onto that as well. With the market, the FLAP D is the kind of top tier. But what we're finding is that there's no space in London now. Power is kind of reaching to a point where we're looking at other places now. So we're kind of getting pushed out, and it's happening. That is also happening in Amsterdam, Paris, and Frankfurt. So you've got places like Madrid, you've got Rome, you've got Warsaw, and then I'm talking to tech clients that are building so much in the States. They're building in Asia. India's got a massive data center market now. Singapore has, China, Australia, even Africa as well. But I mean, looking at that, I think the more internet we use, the more kind of social platforms we use, emails, working from home as well. That kind of adds to your requirements as well. I see the kind of market growing, really rapidly and not stopping, sort of thing.
So you're obviously positioned as a bit of an expert in this field. So there's huge growth potential for the London studio as well. What's your plan for SGP London? And talk to me about how you're going to capitalize this on and what your plan is for the studio.
I think SGP as a practice, we just don't look at one sector. I mean, we've got 35 years experience in logistics, industrial. I've got quite a lot of industrial logistics, healthcare, and data center experience as well. But I think what we're doing as a practice now is that we have experience in transport, healthcare, interiors, commercial, mixed use, residential. It's looking at new opportunities in the southeast. I mean, London, the southeast, is treated as its own kind of hub compared to the rest of the UK. So we see that there is a growing market in other sectors. So it's just kind of at the moment what we're trying to do now is joining those dots to see where kind of new opportunities can land on our table. And over the last 7-8 months now, it has been going really well. I mean, I've just recently done a data center conference where I was kind of moderating the panel discussion. That was received really well, but then it's kind of brought in other sectors as well. So someone that's got experience in, for example, healthcare or commercial has watched our data center panel discussion. But through there, we've spoken to them not just about data centers, but we've got opportunities through healthcare or commercial or residential as well. So I think at the moment for us is just kind of joining the dots, getting our name out there. Even though we have got all this kind of support and experience, we are still kind of a new fresh office in London, sort of thing. So, but yeah, taking it a week at a time, and it's getting there.
No, it's awesome. It's really interesting to see the successes of this London studio happening. I know you mentioned that you do data centers, but I know you're also as a studio involved in healthcare and some heritage work, or on the other side of the business. Like, what's the plans for growing that side out?
Yeah, so I see with the kind of increase in research and development, especially in the healthcare side of things, obviously following the pandemic, just like data centers, it's something that I believe, and I can see that the government is kind of putting a lot of kind of funds in that as well. So we do certainly see an increase in healthcare requirements as well. I kind of mentioned before as well that dementia is increasing as well, and unfortunately you find that in a lot of kind of aged professionals as well. So unfortunately it's happening, and we have to prepare for it. So I see that healthcare is a growing market, certainly in the southeast and all across the kind of UK as well. From that, biomedical, pharmaceutical sector work, has kind of came through as well. Again, that is post the kind of pandemic, but I certainly believe that there's so many opportunities out there, with transport. There's been a lot of government initiatives and also funding in the infrastructure of London as well, with transport links. So there's opportunities as well. We're finding that a lot of existing buildings, old retail properties are being repurposed now as hotels, as commercial, as even logistics, last mile logistics as well, as storage areas. So there's opportunities there for commercial refurb and interiors as well. So yeah, I think at the moment with London, it's endless at the moment. There's a lot happening in London. I'm just kind of looking forward to June and getting out there in the city. I think that's what I'm looking forward to at the moment. So.
Well, that's what I was going to ask next. There's still a good portion, there's still a good chunk of 2021 left. What's in store for, I guess, for the industry and for the studio in the remaining, 6 to 7 months of the year?
Yeah, so we've just kind of recently changed the location, and I think the first priority for us would be to kind of set up our new kind of London office.
Mm-hmm.
So we found a really nice place, kind of in central London. So that's probably going to be a priority for us, to kind of make that place comfortable and culturally comfortable as well, for us, and then just take it a week at a time, and see where the market goes. I think some things you can predict, some things you can, but yeah, I think we've got a very robust 5 to 10 year plan in front of us, and I see certainly my sector looking very positive and kind of looking forward to the future. So I think
that's awesome. Well, I was going to ask you about advice that you would have for other architects. Before I ask you that, I'd actually just thought it'd be interesting to know. So I know you say you mentor a lot of people. Are there any? So you're probably in touch with what a lot of the kind of what the upcoming architects are thinking at the minute, what the big issues are. Are there any particular questions or any particular topics that seem to be coming up more and more among people that you're mentoring at the minute?
Yeah, I think what I'm finding is that obviously looking at an architect, maybe what he was or she was doing 20, 30 years ago is very much different from what they're doing now. I find that architects in a lot of the kind of procurement processes don't even get named as architects unless you're working in a traditional environment. In a D&B environment, we're known as consultants or lead consultants. There is a big difference in an architect and a consultant, because our role and responsibilities, obligations to the client change. I find, for new up and coming architects or juniors, they should really understand the role and responsibilities as an architect. Just be aware that whatever they do has a direct implication and can have an indirect implication as well. There's never me or I, it's always we or us. You should be thinking as a collective group. There's other things like just ensuring that architects are rewarded as well. I find that we go through a 7-year process, which is close to being someone in medicine as a doctor. I feel that architects should be rewarded, and unfortunately in some cases we're not. We probably work longer hours and probably maybe equivalent to someone that is working in medicine. So I think certainly we are undervalued, and unfortunately because of that, some architects tend to move towards other professions. They get into design management, they get into project management, they get into BIM, because they feel it's more rewarding. I think certainly that has to be reviewed, and myself being in that management position and kind of growing into that position from a junior architect, I can look at it as an open-minded person.
Well, why do you think it is that those other industries, architects, feel that they're better rewarded moving into those areas?
I think it basically comes from the top tier, so it starts from the client. Unfortunately, if you've got a client that doesn't have a large enough budget, and then what happens is sometimes architects come in quite competitively as well, and to win that project.
You mean from a price perspective?
Yes. Yeah. And then what usually happens is that the kind of resourcing has to reflect the fee as well, and vice versa. And unfortunately, a lot of these jobs then tend to lose money. And then when you go back and do your lessons learned and you think, well, why have we lost money? Well, because the fee wasn't right, and we had twice the amount of people on the job. My ethos is that I don't encourage overtime that much. I mean, what I do believe is that if you've got a task, try and finish it. Try your best to finish it. again, going back to communication, prioritizing your work. If you can't finish your task, then speak to your line manager and get more resources on. I don't encourage people doing 60, 70, 75 hours, a week. It's not healthy. Tomorrow, I always believe tomorrow's another day. If someone sends, or a client sends something through to you at 4 o'clock, at least as an architect, understand the problem, look at the email, look at the sketch, whatever it is, understand the problem, and make sure that you're 100%, and then send it out in the morning. Because what happens is that sometimes you rush and then you make mistakes. So it's better to do it once correctly and do it in the morning than to rush it and do it twice. It's just counterproductive. So I've always believed that, if something comes in, take a step back, look at it, and take your time on the task. But it depends on clients as well. Some clients are very demanding, and certainly in my sector, they want everything yesterday. So, yeah.
Typical. So thinking about advice for other architects that I suppose are at the same crossroads that you were at, before you joined Stephen George and Partners, what advice would you have for anyone who's considering taking on a leadership role or growing a practice?
I think for me is that, and it's a bit like the course, that architecture has to be in your DNA for you to really, really enjoy it. If you're doing it for the money, it's not a career. I mean, that's just my opinion. You have to live, breathe, eat architecture to get, where, if you want to get to, management. It's a very slow kind of promotional progress as well. It doesn't happen overnight. It's taken me a long time. But what I can say, just like the course, don't give up. Keep tackling a day at a time. Talk to your team leader, talk to your colleagues, talk to your peers. Have an open mind, and just keep fighting every day.
Is there any particular experience that an architect in studio, if you were a recently qualified Part 3, say, who has aspirations of becoming a leader or a studio manager in the future, are there any types of particular experience that they should be going out and trying to get to that's going to be more valuable to them than just going on a natural career progression?
I think for me at the moment is one of the kind of attributes that I do like from someone who's interviews is that they're kind of keen to learn. They might not know everything, but they're just very keen to learn. If they don't know, they'll say, well, I want to learn this. I've interviewed candidates where one of the criteria is they need to have strong Revit skills. But then at the interview, because of looking at their kind of personality and their culture and their keenness to learn and climb that career ladder, we've said, well, we can give you some Revit training. It's not a deal breaker. But every student that I've dealt with, I've told them that just learn the software. That's the first thing that interviewers will ask you, that how good is your Revit? How good is your kind of modeling? Because the thing is that once you do kind of qualify and get in as a Part 3, unless you're working for a small practice of maybe 4 to 5 people, you will get a lot of experience. But if you're working for one of the kind of top 5 AJ practices, you'll be pigeonholed in doing maybe curtain walling packages or wall setting out details for months and months. So that software will help you. But then a lot of kind of youngsters are not good at their language skills as well. I think as an architect, you have to be very good at your emails and your English and language skills, just as well as your kind of technical skills as well. Because what I find is that every day there's always an email that can be a bit tricky to answer when it comes from a client or a contractor. So it's kind of reading between the lines, and I feel that is some training that should be given to youngsters at a very early age, so they can adapt to that and be better at writing emails as well. Yeah.
Great advice. Well, Mohammed, thanks so much for coming on the show. Some really interesting insights there. And
thanks for having me. Yeah.
no problem. What I will do for the listeners, I will link in the description to the YouTube version of this video, links to Stephen George and Partners, so they can check out more about what you do. And yeah, once again, thanks for coming on the show. It's been really interesting.
Yeah, no, it's been really good chatting to you, Ryan. Great.